A beautiful Virginia morning has greeted us at one of North America's premier road racing venues, VIR, Virginia International Raceway. 3.27 miles through the Virginia countryside, and we're about to go qualifying for rounds 5 and 6 of the Fanatec GT World Challenge America, powered by AWS. My name is Ryan Marie, and Amanda Busick and Calvin Fish are alongside. It's a pleasure to have your company as well. Cars already on track, and Calvin, this has been a season thus far dominated by K-Pax Racing, but this weekend it's not been totally straightforward for the team that has won each of the first 4 races between its 2 cars.
Yeah, this racetrack is beautiful. It's old school, but it's very unforgiving, and Venturini aboard the number 6 K-Pax Lamborghini Huracan in a practice session yesterday morning. Had it off towards the end of this back straightaway, Madison Avenue, as these teams start to warm up here. And had a major off, a lot of cosmetic damage, but it meant that they missed the final practice session yesterday, but they're back out there. So we see these teams getting up to speed. Michael Diner's not hanging around.
No, a couple of cars weaving back and forth, trying to bring the pressures up on the Pirelli tires. More on the qualifying in a moment, but first let's hear from Amanda Busick in the pit lane.
Well, guys, in the Pro-Am class of the GT World Challenge, the Wright Motorsports car of Jan Halen and Fred Pordad leads that battle over the DXDT Mercedes. And as you enter into the weekend, after 2 races, how are you feeling, or 2 event weekends, how are you feeling about your performance this season?
Well, I think we've had a good start to the season, and we've been continuing to test and develop the car and work on getting Fred up to speed, and he's getting more and more comfortable in the car. So I think we're all excited about the rest of the season.
You guys were able to test here at VIR a couple of weeks ago. How will that parlay to the experience here? Yeah,
we've had a really good test here. Yesterday was maybe translate as well as we thought it would. The track was a little green, so we're waiting for the track to come to us a little bit, but we're hoping that this afternoon in the race the rubber will be there and the car will be back to where it was in the test.
Thank you.
It's been a great start to the season for last year's AM champion Fred Pordad, now stepping up to Pro-Am alongside Jan Halen. Back to the storylines coming into this qualifying session, Calvin. A great effort from the Optimum Motorsports team to have a car here ready to race. You talked about how treacherous this track could be, and Brendan Reeb learned that firsthand earlier this week.
He did, right through the corner that Michael Diner's just negotiating right now. Turn 10 towards the end of the S as he dropped the wheel, ended up firing into the barriers pretty hard on the left-hand side. Car was destroyed. They then went to work on the telephone to resource another chassis. Got one from up in Canada. That car was driven down by the MIA team. It's essentially a brand new car. Just did a shakedown run at Mont Tremblant a few weeks ago. So they got the car out last night, did a hardship lap. So they're on the back foot, but it was a strong debut for that team at COTA a few weeks ago.
Once again, 16 cars on the entry list. It's a very familiar cast of characters if you've been following the championship throughout the start of the season. But it is a very busy weekend of sports car racing globally, and there have been a few conflicts. And as a result, there are a number of drivers this weekend in fill-in roles, and some of them have already impressed.
Yeah, very much so. TR3 have got Sandy Mitchell. He's a Lamborghini factory part. He comes from Scotland, and he impressed yesterday leading one of the practice sessions. He's filling in because there's a lot of racing going on globally, as you said, at the Nürburgring 24-hour race that starts in just a couple of hours. There's a round of the ELMS Championship going on this weekend, so we've got 3 drivers filling in this category this weekend.
Some of the first times popping up on the board, and it is Andrea Caldarelli who has been the man in qualifying. It seems like more often than not in the opening couple of weekends of the season, who's posted the fastest time so far, a 1:44.612 second lap time. Michael Dinan, you saw the Turner BMW a moment ago. That car is in second, and Calvin, that's a team that comes into this weekend with a great deal of expectation. They've had a lot of success running GT3 BMWs around this place in recent years.
Yeah, Turner won here in another championship last year with that same platform, M6, and they did a couple of days testing. Hasn't been the strongest start to the season for both Robbie Foley and Michael Dinan, but they're gradually getting their arms around getting this BMW to work better on these Pirelli tires. So they feel strong coming in this weekend, and Michael Dinan is certainly put a good lap on the board already.
Look at this lap that's building from Andrea Caldarelli. You can see the graphic on the screen. You see S1 and S2. Those are the first 2 sectors around this 3.27 mile track. and you see the purple background. That means Caldarelli has put in the fastest sector time of anyone in those sectors so far. This is the run to the start-finish line, and faster yet in Sector 3. So resetting that benchmark time, Andrea Caldarelli on provisional pole, but still 9 minutes and change left in this session.
Yeah, and that's a couple of tenths quicker than the fastest lap we saw yesterday in the 2 practice sessions, but still not what we've seen in testing here. I spoke to Colin Brown last night. They were scratching their head with the DXDT Mercedes AMGs because they ran 43s very comfortably in practice here a couple of weeks ago. Racetracks typically evolve depending on the conditions and the track temperatures, but I think that rain that we got here on Thursday night certainly related to the fact what Jan Halen was talking about, the racetrack being very green, didn't have the grip that the track and the teams were expecting when they hit the track this morning. Here's an off here. Oh boy, it's the 70 machine. Brendan Aribi's got away with this one. This is a brand new car that they got, as we mentioned, brought down from Canada just yesterday, rolled it into the paddock, and got it back out just a couple of hours later. So not the start of the session they were looking for.
I had an interesting conversation with Brendan Arib yesterday in the paddock, and his co-driver, McLaren factory driver Ollie Milroy. And this is a first experience for both of them at this circuit. Brendan was a little wishy-washy. He acknowledged there are a lot of risks you have to take to be fast around this place, and he's coming off of a weekend. Whoa, that's a instance of dropping the wheels off just a little bit there for the Windward Racing car. That would be Russell Ward behind the wheel at the moment. But he's coming off of a race in the Fanatec GT World Challenge Europe Endurance Cup last weekend at Paul Ricard, which is the polar opposite of VIR. Plenty of runoff if you have a little mistake. This place, not so much. His co-driver, though, Ollie Milroy, was all smiles. He said he loves this place. He's never been here before, as we've got a spin from David Askew and tire contact as well into the tire wall there. And that brings out the red flag with 7:48 on the clock. The clock does stop here in this instance. But Caldarelli over Ward, then Lewis, your top 3, as the red flag waves at VIR.
Well, the beauty of this racetrack is the rolling hills. The problem is when you've had a lot of wet weather, particularly this week, suddenly you hit that grass and it's just a skating rink. You've literally got no control over the race car. It's just going to follow the cambers of the hills there, and it's put David into the wall early.
Just to wrap up the story real quick, it is because of that risk that Ollie Milroy said he rates this in his top 3 tracks worldwide, with a place like Spa, which speaks for itself. And then talk about a place where you can't make any mistakes, the street course at Macau. He said those 2 and VIR, his 3 favorite tracks in the world.
Yeah, you've got to put it all on the line here to get the lap time, but then when you do that and you just cross that line, it's ready to bite you. So that's the challenge, that's the beauty of it, and we come from one extreme to the other. We come from a track like Paul Ricard at Cota with massive amounts of runoff room, and you come here and suddenly those little mistakes you got away with 2 or 3 weeks ago, suddenly you're going to have a big, big issue, and a lot of work to get done for those race cars to be fixed for the race this afternoon.
Caldarelli, Ward, Lewis, the top 3. Michael Dynan, 4th in the 4th of the Pro Class cars. So we do have all 4 of the Pro cars at the top, and we would expect that. This is the first qualifying session of 2 that we'll have back-to-back. And if you're due to the championship Q1, which we're in now, that sets the grid for race 1 later today. Q2 will set the grid for race 2 of the weekend tomorrow. And for the Pro-Am lineups, it is the more experienced professional driver that will take to the wheel for Q2 and set the grid for tomorrow's race. So we do anticipate the Pro Class cars with an all-Pro lineup starting 1 through 4. That's not a huge surprise, but every once in a while you do see a surprise or 2. And I mean, look how close Fred Pordad is to Dynan. It's not that far off, just a second off the pace. And you know, we're only 47% of the way into this qualifying session, so I suspect there's still more time out there for these teams and drivers once they resume.
Yeah, I think and drivers approach a session very differently. Some people just go on the attack immediately, like Caldarelli, who jump to the top and just continue to improve his times. Other drivers kind of get into a rhythm, don't make that early mistake in the session, just try and build up to the speed. But you can get caught out. It's only a 15-minute session, which if we went green the whole way would be about 7 time laps, which is not a lot of time to work with. And now we've got this red flag. Hopefully we'll get back out there and get a few more minutes on the board.
One name that might be a bit unfamiliar to viewers that's on the screen there on the left side in the rundown is Michael DeMeo, currently 10th fastest in the Compass Racing Acura NSX GT3 Evo. He's filling in for Rodrigo Salas as we go green once again. Rodrigo with commitments in Europe this weekend. And that brings up a neat opportunity for DeMeo to reunite with the Compass Racing team with whom he raced in what was then Pirelli World Challenge touring cars and actually won a championship back in 2014. Has been doing some single-make Porsche racing over the last few years. Really hasn't raced a ton in recent years, but had this great opportunity to get hooked back up with Joe Beck and Carl Thompson paired alongside Matt McMurray, and seems to be taken to the NSX quite nicely.
Yeah, his first session in a car of this nature was yesterday's morning's practice session, so it was a big learning curve for Michael. He's a very talented young driver, 29 years old now, and won that 2014 championship, and ironically beat his team boss, Carl Thompson, to the championship that year. So they shared a lot of podiums together. They have a great friendship, and Carl certainly has a lot of respect for Michael's abilities behind the wheel.
At the open of the show, we discussed the issues for this number 6 K-Pax Racing Lamborghini with the crash. Giovanni Venturini at the wheel back in practice yesterday. And you can see, instead of the all-green paint scheme we've become accustomed to, it is the bare carbon bodywork at the front. The good news, the car did slide off the track. I think it was turn 14, but it went into a tire barrier and hit pretty straight on. And speaking to the team, they felt very fortunate that more or less everything was straight. Nothing was bent too extremely, and they did have to miss practice 2 yesterday. However, they did feel quite lucky that the damage was not more significant.
Yeah, and he said, or I actually listened to his teammate in the drivers' meeting yesterday talk about the fact there's a lot of mud on the road that caught Venturini out. So another consequence of this racetrack, you go for a ride yourself, when you come back on, typically you can bring a lot of mud and debris on there as well, and that's what caught out that driver in the session yesterday.
Should also talk about the implications. We saw David Askew's car back on the pit lane. And that's the problem if you have an issue in Q1. Q2 is right afterwards. So if there is some damage to that car, which right now, with Askew behind the wheel, has turned the 8th fastest lap of the session thus far, if that car needs repairs, it puts them on the back foot when Ryan Dial takes over, if he even gets to in Q2.
Yeah, and there's some limits to what you can do with that car. So they might be able to work on the car and might throw away David's time in this session, but more importantly, try and give Ryan a healthy and fast race car for the second part of this qualifying. Depends how much damage there is there.
More from the pit lane with Amanda.
Well, Cal, that is correct. They are going to throw out the time for David Askew for starting that red, but the guys do have time to work on that Mercedes here on pit lane for Ryan to get back out and make a qualifying effort.
That's a good point, because he was going to lose time set anyway for bringing out the red flag. So working on the car, which would cause you to lose any time set anyway, that's kind of a moot point, because that time would have been going in the trash bin anyway.
Yes, correct. But again, they don't have a ton of time. You can see the clock running down with just under 5 minutes to go. There's a 5 minutes break, so in about 10 minutes we see the 12 car. That's a pit out.
It is.
That's a strange one.
Frank Gannett.
Boy.
Ian Lacey racing the team. Big step up for them. Drew Stavely, the co-driver. Big congratulations to Drew. Welcome to daughter Chloe just a couple of weeks ago. He said the most sleep he's had since then was the night he arrived here at VIR. We have a red flag as Frank Gannett facing the wrong way. I think it goes to show how slippery the grass can be if you get off in it.
Yeah, and he just tried to ride it out and just gradually ease his way back on, but right as he made that move and got some bite on the right side, it just turned the car, and luckily there was no one else coming down at high speed. Otherwise that could have been a very nasty moment for Frank.
So it does bring out the red flag for the second time. Gannett currently 16th out of the 16 cars to have set times. That is the whole field, as a matter of fact. So 4:27 on the clock. And Calvin, what does this do to the teams that have their strategy for qualifying? It probably doesn't involve stopping and starting a bunch of times.
Well, again, there's enough time if we can get reset here. I'm not sure how much time certain this session is, so if there's some flexibility with the schedule, there's still time to get out there, get another couple of green flag laps in, but certainly putting the pressure on for some of the drivers who've maybe not yet set a representative time. Also what it doesn't really give you a great read on the car from like a 7-lap continuous run that we were anticipating to then set up for your second drive. You get a lot of feedback during that initial run as to how you would like to set your tire pressures, your starting pressures, even your temperatures. These tires are coming out of blankets and ovens to put on a fresh set for the second part of qualifying. So a little bit of that information is missing here right now for all of the teams.
I suspect this would help the cause for DXDT Racing, because effectively it gives them extra time to prepare that car that had the issue with David Askew behind the wheel. We saw him and his co-driver Ryan Dial taking a look at the data just a few moments ago, and we are back to green with just over 4 minutes left. How many chances are you going to get? Maybe one real flying lap?
Well, I think you should be, these guys who are out early should be able to get 3 laps essentially without seeing the checkered flags. You start that 3rd lap, and then they'd be on a checkered lap that lap. So it should give you 2 good laps. So right now, get back into a rhythm, find some space if you're not leading the pack here, and then just nail that 2nd and 3rd lap here.
Lamborghini, Mercedes, Lamborghini, BMW, Porsche. That is the top 5 as far as the manufacturers are concerned.
The key is, with the time on the board, you can't afford to dawdle. If you want to get 3 laps in, you've got to get going. This outlap is important.
Here's George Kurtz, co-driving with Colin Brown, and they called in a pinch hitter as far as the engineering staff is concerned for this weekend. A gentleman that is well known in the sports car racing world, and certainly Colin Brown knows him quite well.
Yeah, Colin's dad, Jeff Brown, is pinch hitting in the engineering role here this weekend. Their regular engineer is tied up with the Mercedes AMG team over at the Nürburgring 24-hour race. So it's not only drivers who have conflicts, a lot of these essential crew members do as well.
Part of the complicated scheduling puzzle that goes in every season, with championships trying their best not to step on each other's toes.
And this round was moved, remember, because with CTMP being moved, there's a shuffling of the calendar here in North America between the different series who don't like to conflict. And but it did hurt people like Jordan Pepper, whose primary role, and Andrea Caldarelli are here this weekend. They would have been competing at Nürburgring without this event clash.
Yeah, there's a number of drivers that fall into that category. We mentioned Sandy Mitchell earlier with TR3 racing this weekend. That's because Giacomo Altoe is racing at the Nürburgring, and I think he's doing so for the team that Andrea Caldarelli manages, actually, the FFF Orange 1 team racing at the Nürburgring. But back to what's happening here at VIR. Just a couple of minutes left in Q1. And we'll see what George Kurtz and company can do. Caldarelli and Russell Ward still in the pits, as is Michael Dinan. So only one from the top 4 currently out on the track. Does that indicate they feel like they've got what they can out of the car?
Well, they're in the top 4. I mean, you're then going to go back out there, put another heat cycle on these tyres. These are the tyres essentially going to start the race with this afternoon. So you're just factoring in the big picture. I mean, how much do you want to go out there? Obviously, the racetrack, if you drive off the road, there's a chance you're going to have contact. If you lay down a pretty good lap, you just got to be honest with yourself. Yeah, there's another half a second that can lead me up the grid, a spot or a row or 2. But if you're pretty close to the limit, let's just park it and save these tires for that race.
And again, we've seen what the consequences can be if you're just a half an inch off.
Yeah, and that's the key. When you're pushing to find those last couple of tenths, that's when you're more likely to have a moment.
George Kurtz and Colin Brown sharing this Mercedes DXDT Racing. It's been an interesting season, actually, for this pairing. If you think about, in both cases, at Sonoma and at COTA, the first race of the weekend has not been good. And then they've had a big bounce back in the second race of the weekend, and they're desperate to try and put together a full weekend here at VIR.
Yeah, and I think that's what you expect from this team. They're very well prepared, have a new home now in North Carolina. So this is essentially their home racetrack. They're doing a ton of testing. They're doing all of the prep. The team has worked together for a long time. Certainly Colin and George know each other very well. George is now very much up to speed and comfortable with GT3 machinery. So this is a big year for them. They expect to get results.
Disappointing news from the pit lane regarding the sister car of Askew and Dial. Amanda letting us know that that car not fixable in the short term, at least, and so we will not see Ryan Dial qualify. That's a big hit for them. Askew at the moment has slipped back to 13th, but we expect him to lose some of those times anyway. So they'll have a big hole to claw out of in both races, it would appear, this weekend at VIR. Checkered flag is out. Drivers on a lap can finish that lap. Haven't haven't seen any major changes. This is Corey Lewis. Very curious what he can do in the repaired K-Pax Racing Lamborghini, currently third fastest.
Yeah, let's see what we can put together here on this lap. Don't see anything lightning on the timing screen so far, not even a personal best in sector 1 or 2.
Yeah, bit off of the ultimate pace needed.
I think he's going to park it here.
Yeah, it looks like he's backed it off just a bit. Still a third place starting position for race 1. Not a bad place to be. With this team car on pole, though, and I do wonder if there's a bit of a inter-team rivalry to some degree, because it has been 3 wins to 1 for the 3 car over the 6 car thus far. And actually, Calvin, the win for the 6 car at Coda in race 2 was a bit strange, because they were running 1-2, and all of a sudden we saw Jordan Pepper appear to have a problem, and there goes Giovanni Venturini through to take the lead on the final lap. And Jordan Pepper was telling me last night he just felt like there was a very strange vibration, something going on with the tire pressures, and he did not know what to expect from that car, and ultimately decided it was better to preserve a 1-2 for the team than try and drive through a potential issue.
Yeah, and I think that's just smart heads-up driving and decision-making by him.
Yeah, certainly so. I think Taylor Hagler did improve on that lap, so one of the few to be able to take advantage of those final 4 minutes. That's the Racer's Edge Acura you see right there. Taylor jumping up to 9th on the leaderboard. So it does appear everyone has taken the checkered flag. Grant Caldarelli, yet another pole to start the season. Not a huge surprise, an immense talent, especially in a Lamborghini, one of the best Lamborghini factory drivers you will find. And his teammate, not a factory driver, but extremely talented as well. We'll see Jordan Pepper behind the wheel of that car coming up in Q2 in just a moment. Russell Ward, Corey Lewis, Michael Dinan, Fred Hordat, the top 5. Then Michael DeMeo on his debut. How impressive is that? 6th overall, but 2nd in Pro-Am in his first GT3 appearance.
That's awesome. He'll be pumped about that, as will Carl Thompson and the whole Compass crew. So that's a nice rebound. They've had a few wheel issues, talking to Carl yesterday. They think they got their head around it. Really just mental errors from the team. No real equipment issue. It wasn't wheel gun issue or things like that, but a nice run for them today.
Let's head down to the pits in Amanda.
Well, Andrea Caldarelli has that pole, and it's his first appearance here at VIR. And as you look back at your performance, what do you make of the track here at VIR?
I mean, it's a great track. The first time, as you said, it's we've been testing a little bit yesterday and this week, and it's a great track. It's a good fun, so I really enjoyed it. And lap time just come out as I'm driving with a smile. So. Well,
the K-Pax Lambos are team cars, but is there any rivalry between the two teams?
Yeah, I mean, there is. I think we will see a very tough qualifying too. So I make sure I push Jordan enough for the next Q2. I think you're gonna see a lot of cars close together.
Great to hear from Andrea. You heard him talking about, well, I'm driving with a smile, so the lap time comes. Did you find that to be the case in your career, Calvin? If it's a track that you just love driving, the speed follows?
I think so. I think you just have a comfort factor with some circuits over others. It could just be you like a car that's balanced in a certain way, and with this racetrack, it really demands a lot of everything. You need compliancy over the bumps. You need a better ride the bumps through that first sector there. You need that high-speed stability. You need power down, traction off the corners, particularly out of Oak Tree down the Madison Avenue back straightaway. But this racetrack, unless you're driving a car that's not ill-handling, I think most drivers are smiling. It'll scare you now and again, do you know what I mean? Because it's very edgy, but the thought of getting out there in this beautiful natural setting and the challenges that the track demands from you and the race car is something that you always enjoy.
Let's take a moment, because we haven't yet, to talk about this racetrack. Describe, if you could, some of the different challenges that it presents, some of the areas that are a bit iconic as well.
Well, I think there's some good overtaking opportunities here. Certainly these grid positions that are being set are always important to set up your weekend, but this racetrack does allow for passing, particularly later into the runs as you get a little bit of tire degradation. It's going to be quite warm tomorrow, so the racetrack will probably get a little bit slippery after about halfway through the stints before the pit stop, mandatory pit stop. So that will enhance the opportunities for passes to be made, but you come down that front straightaway into this turn one, very high speed approach, double apex are here, and then you kind of open up the door and you sort of like swing out wide. You got to get that power down, like right out where that left side tire is, where you see all the black rubber being laid down. So traction control be eaten into a little bit later into those stints as well. Then through here, you can go side by side here, but it's very difficult to coexist through that sector. Then through here, very technical. You want to get up on the curves, use those curves without exceeding track limits, and that will bite you a nice chunk of time off the lap as well. Then from here on out is just enjoy the ride. You go through that ribbon of asphalt up through these climbing S's. There's nothing else like it. It's just superb. The speeds keep climbing. Probably about 150 miles an hour at its peak before it slows down for the last couple. Then talk about slowing down. You got Oak Tree, no longer an Oak Tree, sitting on the inside of the apex there, but renowned corner and very important to finish off the second half of the lap.
Michael Cooper not looking very patient. He's in the Mercedes following on Halen in the Porsche. And finally, Jan relents and lets Michael through. Michael wanted to push early, it would appear. He and Aaron Vogel did some testing here at VIR, and both felt like it was a very productive session. But I think you talked about it earlier, the DXD team as a whole, maybe a little bit puzzled that some of the things that they found in testing haven't totally applied here this weekend.
Well, you run into a bit of a conundrum. I mean, if you haven't tested here, you adjust to what the track has given you when you arrive. If you've tested already and say, this is the setup that really works here, it's like, do you wait for the track to evolve, grip up, come back to you, or do you start to make those changes early in the weekend with the risk of getting lost a little bit?
Well, Cooper slowing down here in this final sector of the circuit. This is the final corner known as Hog Pen. Love the names of the corners around this place. You've got, and even the straightaways have interesting names, with Madison Avenue, the long back straightaway out of Oak Tree, which for so many years had that massive oak tree planted there at the apex. Son of Oak Tree planted on the outside of the track now. Perhaps one day we'll take that spot. But you've got Horseshoe and NASCAR Bend and
That
Snake.
was left hook.
That was left hook, and you can see why.
You have the odd counterpunch through there. I think Kurtz and Askew came together there a couple of years ago, in fact, teammates. So expects Margie Bargie.
That should be fun.
Of the weekend.
Yeah, when we get to the 90-minute races for GT World Challenge America. First one later on this afternoon. Let's do the weekend tomorrow. Jordan Pepper now behind the wheel, the South African who has been so impressive. Joined up with K-Pax a year ago. He was part of the Bentley driver lineup. That's the kind of car K-Pax was campaigning over in GT World Challenge Europe primarily. And so impressed the team that when they made the switch to Lamborghini, they said, Jordan, you're coming along with us. And he has not skipped a beat.
No, they're very high on this young man, and they should be. I mean, his results already in his young career are very impressive, and we talked about his decision-making at the end of that Coda race. Gave up the win, but still put big points on the board to consolidate their championship lead, and those are the decisions that you have to make. He's excellent in traffic. We saw him slice and dice his way through the field there, and he just seems to tick all of the boxes. He's very much a man of the moment and delivering.
Won overall at the Liqui Moly Bathurst 12-hour a year ago, and what was a memorable drive for the Bentley team in his season so far. 3 wins and a second place. Each of the wins an overall win. Has pole twice, and her fastest lap of the race once. That was back at race 1 at Circuit of the Americas. Jan Halen, the rapid Belgian driver who now lives in Florida for Wright Motorsports, currently second fastest, right behind Jordan Pepper and by the narrowest of margins.
Yeah, this could be a tasty little battle for the pole here, because Jan Halen is very much on form over the last couple of years. Just seems to go from strength to strength. The young man who had a stellar single-seater career kind of slipped through the net and kind of established himself here in the U.S. He was actually managing a race championship here in the U.S. whilst his career kind of went on a bit of a dip, but he's come back, and every time you see him behind the wheel, he's fighting for the win.
And this is one of our super subs this weekend, and he pops to P1. Mikael Grenier, the Canadian, another one that was on the fast track in single-seaters and had the career stall out a bit and has found a nice home racing sports cars. 144.024. That is nearly 0.4 of a second clear of second place. Filling in for Philip Ellis, who is racing over at the Nürburgring this weekend.
That is really impressive lap from him. So the Capex team were worried about the Mercedes, and we were chatting this morning, Ron. I said, well, the DXDT team feel they're struggling a bit. Maybe they were alluding to that Winwood Racing team. Grenier, that's the fastest time of the weekend so far. I bet he'll drop into the 43s.
As we watch Colin Brown driving the 04 for DXDT Racing, his co-driver George Kurtz is with Amanda.
Well, and last year they found success here in race 2, taking the overall win. And George, when you have success at a racetrack, how does that help your approach when it comes to qualifying?
Well, we like the track, and we didn't get a lot of practice time, unfortunately, yesterday with the rain. So we know we can do well here. We've done well in the past with a big win last year. Car's not really where we want it, so we're still fighting that. And, you know, we're just going to run our race like we normally do, put our heads down and do the best we can.
We've talked to several drivers, and they just seem to the joy of this track. What do you love about VIR?
It's like a roller coaster. You know, it has so many different aspects to it. You got hog pen, the back straight, oak tree, I mean, fast turns. And, you know, you got to be careful because there's really no runoff here. So it makes it challenging, but it's a great track. I love it, and hopefully we'll do as well as we did last year.
Thank you, George.
Thanks.
This is the TR3 Racing Lamborghini now. It is Sandy Mitchell driving, so the third of our super subs. An excellent Lamborghini driver promoted to the factory lineup as of late.
Just went purple. Sector 1 is the fastest first sector, and just a few thousandths out on sector 2. So this is going to be close to joining that 44 flat club with Grenier and Halen.
It is so close here in the third sector. Let's keep a close eye on this Lamborghini right now. 7th overall. What kind of time can he post? The long run down the pit straight to the start-finish line, and Sandy Mitchell clocks in with a lap that is good enough to jump him up to third. Dropped a little bit of time there in that third sector, though, Calvin.
Yeah, just over a 10th off, so he's just got to regroup here. The key is, what was your starting pressures? Have they already peaked? Are you going to be on the downward slide of the performance? As the run goes on, fuel burns off, so the car gets a little bit lighter. Theoretically, should be quicker, but it's all about matching that light fuel load towards the end of the session to the tire pressures.
Robbie Foley, the Turner Motorsport crew, the lone BMW in this field. Trending a bit in the wrong direction there in Sector 2. Let's see where he ends up, and Foley currently 6th. Now we take a look at Jacob Abel, another open-wheel guy who is still pursuing the open-wheel route, but got this opportunity to do half of the season with Racers Edge Motorsports, was part of the HPD GT3 Academy a year ago, along with his co-driver, Taylor Hagler.
You've got Dane Cameron, who had a ton of success with this chassis a couple of years ago with real-time racing, here this weekend coaching these young drivers, so they've certainly got a great opportunity to be the sponge and learn from Dane here this weekend.
Now, this was the dominant team in many respects a year ago with Trent Hidman and Shelby Blackstock putting up so many wins overall. Jacob Abel currently 12th, and this is the Optimum Racing McLaren. Now back to Jan Halen in the Wright Motorsports Porsche.
Slide there. Vincent Oak Tree just rushed through that last corner there, turn 11, and that will have hurt him. He'd have been correcting there, wouldn't have been back to power early like he typically would try to be there off that very low speed corner, and that essentially dictates the speed all the way down Madison Avenue here, and your terminal speed as you hit the brakes once again. You can see there, sector 2 just a little bit off, and that's that slip we saw there.
Doesn't take much, does it?
So close to at the top. He's currently second, just 0.04 back of the pole position time. Was that slip going to thwart his challenge here? Using every inch of the road there out of Hogpen.
This has been a nice, clean Q2 after a couple of red flags in Q1. Jan Halen, look how close. Second fastest. Did improve his time. He was second to begin with, but couldn't quite jump.
And that was that moment. I guarantee you that moment was at least half a tenth that we saw there.
Looks like we've got perhaps an overheating issue for Vesko Kozarov. This is the Reardon Racing Lamborghini that he shares with Jeff Burton. See some steam coming out of the right side.
There's a cutoff there to the short circuit. He's got suspension issues, I think.
Yeah, you're right. I wonder how that happened. I suspect, though, that it could lead to a red flag, just as I started talking about how clean the session has been. And indeed, there it is, red flag displayed. Ollie Milroy, loving life, driving this McLaren around one of his new favorite tracks. And Matt McMurray just behind at the Compass Racing NSX.
Tell you what, the big surprise is Jordan Pepper sitting down in 4th position currently, 4 tenths off the pole. So he laid down an early lap. Maybe they went for high tire pressures to get the energy going early, but they're peaked. So let's see if this little reset, if we get back out there, he can rebound and get further up the board. Great to see 3 different manufacturers, Mercedes, AMG, Porsche, and Lamborghini setting the 3 best times. So a lot of parity here in this championship.
And it's interesting as we talk about seemingly each of these race weekends, these cars, they make their power in a different way. They make their speed in different ways. And they are balanced together through the SRO's Balance Their Performance system. But especially at a track like this, which does have such a variety of corners, there's going to be a car that might be great in Sector 1 but struggles in Sector 3 and vice versa. And seeing that ebb and flow can be quite fascinating.
It can, and you'll see that over the lap time in terms of who's achieving what in the 3 sectors. And you'll also see it in the race, like that concertina effect, as one car may have power down, but one car comes back a little bit stronger at the end of the straightaway. So Jordan Pepper's day is done, so I'm not sure if the teams have had a message that there's going to be no more time left, but he's obviously feeling he's maxed out his ability to lay down a faster lap time, shaking his head a little bit here.
Well, that's because he's only 4th fastest, and I'm sure that is not where he would like to be. He's still 2nd, though, out of the pro class. What an impressive performance from Mikael Grenier, the Canadian, who has set the fastest time so far by 18 thousandths of a second over Jan Halen. Then it's Sandy Mitchell, another debutant in the series. But he's got some experience racing here at VIR in Lamborghinis, dating back to a season of Lamborghini Super Trofeo North America. I believe that was back in 2019.
You see the top speeds that were achieved during that session, just shy of 165 miles an hour. Lots of different manufacturers represented there, with Porsche leading the way. Acura is very much in the mix, and you'd expect that BMW to be strong here. Has good straightaway speed. That's where it achieves a lot of its lap time, but also that long wheelbase car should be well suited to the sweeping turns here, particularly up through Sector 2. May struggle a little bit through the first sector, through the tight, twisty technical stuff like it did at Circuit of the Americas, but just looking down the order, great performance by Ollie Milroy aboard that new, for them, McLaren here this morning. So only 7 tenths off the fastest time. He currently lines up 4th in Pro-Am, 7th overall. And Venturini, big surprise, that 6th car. We talked about the damage yesterday, but you'd expect that car to be 100% fit, and he's down in 9th overall right now.
Yeah, so the 2 K-Pax cars that have dominated this championship, they've won each of the races overall between those 2 cars, and they are 4th and they are 9th.
Well, that's the level of competition. You only need the favorites, a bit like Mercedes-Benz in Formula One right now. If they're a little bit off, suddenly there's a bunch of people ready to leapfrog over them. We're seeing the same here. When K-Pax don't have the best session, suddenly they're not just 2nd, 3rd, they're a little bit deeper in the pack.
And we got an update a few minutes ago from Amanda in the pit lane. I evidently had a chance to get a quick debrief with Corey Lewis, who told her that he just feels the setup of that car's a little bit off and that they're operating off of the back foot a little bit. And you have to wonder if the lost track time yesterday hurt them. They had the crash in practice 1. They did not take part in practice 2.
Yeah, and a lot of front-end damage, so the setup was very important, particularly the ride heights on these cars. So when you put a new front suspension on, even if you put it on the setup pad, you get out there, it settles a little bit. Maybe it's too much on the nose, creating a little bit of a loose condition, oversteer in the race car. So anything can put it outside of the window where the drivers feel they can really attack this racetrack.
So under red flag conditions at the moment, Vesko Kozarov had to pull his number 91 Reardon Racing Lamborghini to an access road, had some apparent damage to the right front. And there you see the great staff here at VIR going to work to help retrieve that car and hopefully get us back to green flag conditions for the final 4 minutes and 51 seconds. And it is a tremendous staff here at VIR. Connie Nyholm and Kerrigan Smith, they do so much work, as does their entire staff, to welcome us and to welcome fans back to the track. It's been since the Indy 8 Hour last year that an SRO America race has been able to welcome some fans, and for the first time since before the COVID-19 pandemic, fans back in the paddock area this weekend. And I have to say, it's been fun to see. Talking to Kerrigan yesterday, he said the ticket sales have been very, very strong, trending even above what we saw back in 2019. And the feel was that there are a lot of race fans just anxious to get back to the racetrack and get to experience this in person once again. And a lot of campers around the track. You just saw a shot of some of the hills around the circuit, and it does bring a smile to my face to see the race fans have access to their favorite sport once again.
Well, if you're tuning in this morning and you are close by where you could make the trip, come on over. The weather looks perfect for the next couple of days. So we got some rain through the system on Thursday evening. It looks good for the rest of the way till Sunday night. And
especially if you are either former or active military, there's a lot going on to celebrate the military this weekend. Should have a flyover for our GT World Challenge America race coming up this afternoon, which is very exciting. But for active duty military, free admission. For former military members out of the service, it's half-price admission, and we'd certainly love to host you here this weekend if you are nearby. It looks like we must have had the checkered flag thrown on the session, so it will be Windward Racing. Mikhail Grenier starting on pole. How about that? The young Canadian getting a chance to race stateside with this team, the same team he races in GT World Challenge Europe Endurance Cup with. And really showing why they entrusted him with this car when Philip Ellis, the regular co-driver for Russell Ward, was unavailable.
Yeah, and let's not forget those two teams fought it out hard at COTA with different drivers obviously on board, so it's certainly shaping up nicely for this. That's for tomorrow's race, this grid that we're looking at right now.
Jan Halen second by just 18 thousandths of a second. You know,
that was there. The time was there. He
was.
Just pushed through that turn 11 there, and you saw that little slip going into Oak Tree, and that was more than enough to make up those 18 thousandths of a second.
Sandy Mitchell, very impressive in his first race with TR3 Racing, third fastest. Jordan Pepper, fastest of the K-Pax crew. Second, though, out of the pro class as we take a look at the highlights. The Turner Motorsport BMW, sixth fastest in Q2. As well as the pace-setter car from Q1 with Andrea Caldarelli behind the wheel.
And his teammates set a similar lap time, so wasn't it Jordan Pepper was off? It just seemed like that car is not given the lap time that some of their competitors have. Here's an off Brendan Iribe, and I'm sure he was sweating as he was going backwards, and then David Askew again. Out to the left front, couldn't get that car fixed up for his teammate even to see qualifying.
Yeah, very costly. They'll be starting at the back. David Askew and Ryan Dial. Corey Lewis and Giovanni Venturini sharing that green Lamborghini for K-Pax. This was an interesting moment for Frank Gannett. That brought out the second of two red flags in Q1. Look at the Compass Racing car. Very impressive debut for Michael DeMeo filling in for Rodrigo Salas.
Taylor Hagler had a nice run. I think she's fifth in class for the starting position this afternoon, and teammate Jacob nice job as well here.
Just a great speed shot of these cars through one of the best road racing venues you can find on the continent. Jan Halen so close to putting that car on pole, but ultimately it was the Windward Racing car for race 2. Mikhail Grenier, so impressive. Able to wrangle that speed out of that machine. Colin Brown for DXDT Racing. Team still searching for a little bit of speed, especially relative to their co-Mercedes entrance out of the Windward stable.
But this racetrack will evolve. You get a lot of racing here this morning before these guys get back on racetrack this afternoon. There'll be some rubber down, and that can change the balance and maybe get them back into their setup window.
Well, now we turn our attention from qualifying to racing, and it's a different setup philosophy for sure when you're talking about a 90-minute race as opposed to 15 minutes of qualifying. All right, well, that was a lot of fun. We know how the field will look when we take the green flag for our 2 GT World Challenge America races coming up later today and tomorrow here at VIR.
Bye.